You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch TV about New Jersey, the birthplace of technology.
And I'd argue sleek-looking dystopias.
Hell yeah. If we've got one thing going for us, it's an abundance of sleek dystopias.
Mm-hmm.
And super fun sites.
I was just going to say, not even just sleek.
No, we've got some rough dystopias, too.
We've got like a real plethora of...
Any kind of dystopia you're looking for, we've got you covered. We've got you covered.
Can I tell you, I just felt an actual surge of pride in my body just now. Most
people don't assume that we have the sleek and shiny fancy dystopias also, but we do.
And I think the one they're picturing is the like Mad Max Fury Road. Wait, I've never seen that movie, but like... You know, the like smokestacky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the turnpike when you leave Newark Airport.
Exactly. But we've got sleek, and then we've also got cool, like wilderness taking over dystopia, too. We've got them all covered.
We've got it all covered.
There's a reason that so many of our shows that we've covered recently.
It's amazing that this is the only one that is like, even though technically it doesn't take place in New Jersey, we watched Severance. And I'm Jody.
Fallout, though, also has Jersey.
Yes.
Fallout's got the overgrown dystopia.
That's true.
We did watch Severance. You are Jody. I'm Andrea.
Yes.
Here we are.
I will say, though, so the reason we're talking about this, if you do not know, is that the location for Lumen Industries in this show was filmed at Bell Works, which used to be Bell Labs, an enormous technology complex in Holmdel, New Jersey.
And again,
where I think my aunt worked.
Get her on the pod. When I read that, you hinted at a good Jersey connection. We should, who cares what order we do this in? This is our podcast.
Exactly.
We're not even recording on a regular day. We can do whatever we want.
Exactly.
When you hinted at it, and then I learned very quickly, I've never been to Bell Labs as a South Jersey person. The Holmdel's more central.
Yeah.
But I assumed they gutted a building and then refit it to look the way it does. But I have since learned
that is how it looks. So it's a very famous complex. It was designed by Eero Saarinen. It's one of his last buildings or complexes that he designed. But it is this giant mirrored glass, like open air atrium in the center, like everything that you see in the show. It's real.
Beautifully symmetrical.
Yeah, everything is symmetrical. It's amazing.
The bird's eye view of the parking lot
is real.
Jody, that's real.
I know.
That's unbelievable.
Their lakes are there. It's the whole, the water tower is there, the whole thing. They didn't need to do anything.
No.
Yeah, it's very cool.
It's really unbelievable.
Yeah. It's very cool.
Learn that.
We will talk a lot, I'm sure, about, because to me, one of the most interesting things about this whole show is the set and setting. So we'll go through
almost the only thing I care about.
I know. We'll talk about the pilot as a whole and the sort of background of it, but I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time on the production. So we watched the pilot only. Technically.
We're going to talk about the pilot.
Yeah, we're only going to talk about the pilot, so we will not spoil the rest of the season. So we talked about the pilot, like you said, Good News About Hell.
Fun name.
Yes, fun name. The series was created by Dan Erickson, directed by Ben Stiller and Aoife McArdle, starring Adam Scott, Zach Cherry, Britt Lauer, Trammell, Jen Tulloch, and a number of other people, including a delightfully awful turn by Michael Chernus. John Turturro, Christopher Walken shows up, Patricia Arquette, like star-studded cast.
I didn't recognize Patricia Arquette for quite a while.
Really?
Yeah.
She's got that, like, oh my gosh, when we were talking about Silo, and we talked about the flowy, silver-haired lady leading the company, has like a
need to
sinister
do a dive on that.
Yeah.
Because there's part of me that likes it, but there's another part of me that's like, oh, there's probably, if we dig into it, something like deeply misogynistic
I'm sure.
about it. Even though for me, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. So the sort of log line for this show, right? The plot follows Mark S., an employee of the fictional corporation Lumen Industries who agrees to a severance program in which his non-work memories are separated from his work memories.
Now, here's the
Oh, I was just going to say, and it premiered in 2022.
So, first thing you need to know, you and our listeners, is that I interpreted that until I sat down to watch this as an Eternal Sunshine situation where it's part of the severance package of leaving, and that once you stop working for this company, they remove your work memories, and there was going to be something. And so I was a little less interested in it, thinking that that was the case, because I thought like it was going to be somebody trying to figure out what their life had been like or something.
Right.
But no.
No.
I think it's way more interesting.
Yeah. And so just to elaborate a little bit on that, the basic premise, in case you didn't watch it, but when the severed worker is at work, they're dubbed innies. The childlike nature is of the language and the people is really interesting. And cannot remember anything of their lives or the world outside. When outside work, they're dubbed outies and cannot remember their time at work. So they experience two different lives with distinct personalities and agendas. And they really know nothing. Like Zach Cherry's character, Dylan, he says he likes to think that his outie lives on a boat.
It's so funny because because at first I was like, immediately, yes, I will do this. What do I care? But then when you realize that like that means the innies never sleep. I mean, they experience the effects of sleep,
but they never feel like they've left. Yeah.
But it's just 24/7, 365 at work. And that is
torture.
Horrifying.
Yeah. Hell, literally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's the more you kind of analyze the idea, the more insane it sounds, like the way that they live. The idea that like and also the idea that there's no communication allowed between the two. Mm-hmm. So that they have all these like code breaking and ways to keep you from communicating even secretly with your outer version. Mm-hmm. I had seen this before. You had not. Nope. Do you want to tell me your initial impressions? I know that you were interested enough to watch 2 more episodes, even though we're only talking about the pilot.
I loved it. As soon as we're done here, probably I will go watch another. As much as I think the mystery is really interesting and the idea of it and the sort of like inviting you to think about what it really means, to whatever. And like, we can get into all of the existential questions of it, but it was also just so good to look at. Mm-hmm. It's so stylized to the point where I was kind of laughing, where I was like, okay, like guys, I get it, but it still just feels really good to look at. Just that, I mean, that opening shot, I have it open here on my screen. It's perfect. Yeah, I know. And there's been some talk. I watched some interviews with like Adam Scott and Dan Erickson, who wrote the whole show, basically, where he talked about them seeing that initial shot of her on the table as almost like her being born. Yeah. Like her being in a womb and like this is her first awakening. But yeah, it's that perfectly symmetrical overhead shot of her like very carefully splayed out on the table. Everything is exactly in its place. Like it is, it's a statement, that first shot. You mentioned Eternal Sunshine. That is one of the things that he references when he talks about his influences. You have to.
Yeah, of course. He also mentions other like 90s films, like obviously Office Space, being John Malkovich, 1984. He also mentions Brazil, Dark City, Playtime, a few other films. But interestingly, did you read about the commercial that he talked about?
No, I don't think so. Okay,
we have to take a quick break.
Okay.
Because you have to watch at least a chunk of this, like 30 seconds of it. I'm going to ask you to watch. I'm going to put a link in the chat. As someone who worked at Starbucks, he also mentions that he was dating someone that worked at Starbucks, and the way that they talked about when he was telling this person about his idea, or vice versa, I can't remember which, but there was a lot of resonance between like the corporate speak at Starbucks, like the talking about the partner and the third place. And I got partner of the quarter once and I was super proud of myself. Like, yeah. So take 30 seconds of this 4+ minute sizzler internal commercial.
All over America, a quiet revolution has been taking place. More and more, both parents are working and raising families. Life seems to be moving faster than ever, and Americans have are redefining what's really important in their lives. They want quality in their personal life, in their business life, in the goods they purchase, and in the food they eat. They want good, basic home cooking, quality food, and they want choices, variety, all at a reasonable price. Americans want value.
I know this isn't the point, but if you want an idea of what 1991 looked like...
Oh, yeah. When he talks about this, when Dan Erickson talks about this ad, he says it's an internal commercial that was sent around to Sizzler employees in 91. It's about 6 minutes long. It's this really Reagan-era, hyper-patriotic, soaring music explanation of why Sizzler is the key to American freedom and why Sizzler's more than a restaurant, it's a revolution. I've known people who worked at Starbucks and there's similar language of, do we make coffee or do we make a better world? Yeah. That's what I hated about working at Starbucks. Well, one of the things. The poor pay, the, terrible customers, the disgusting bathroom, all of those things were bad too. But
of the Starbucks employees really buy in. I had a friend who
some do.
There.
I was shockingly not one of them. But yeah, it's that idea of like, your work is your family. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. So I interrupted you, but you enjoyed it enough that you watched 2 more episodes. You will continue to watch it. I think it's a given that the look of this is really special, but is there anything else that to you was like, I mean, I guess we could just say like the hook? Like what is the thing that made you keep going?
Wow. Man, I think this is just a really successful pilot because there's not one specific thing. It looked great. I think the characters are really distinct, and even the innies who are kind of blank slates and all they really have is what, I think how long has Mark been there? Is he 4 years?
Like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Yeah, somewhere. So he's like a toddler.
Exactly. That's how old his innie is.
Yeah.
And I think that's really fun. The thing that I actually found most interesting is it seems like, and I don't know that it makes sense to do a point-by-point recap for this show.
Right.
But it seems on the surface, this is a show about the people who are severed. Somebody gets out somehow, and that person knows what's really going on at this company. And because of that, he probably wants to try to bring the company down. And I felt like if the mystery of it is just sort of that, of like what evil thing could they be doing, I don't care. But it feels to me like, and I'm hoping there's another layer at least there. And all of the like labyrinth kind of levels and layers and all of that visually and like physically in space have me thinking that hopefully that is actually the case.
Right.
That there is more than just, because I'm like, what's the worst they could be doing that's obvious? Like killing people, like feeding off, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping there's something a little more like, I don't know, cerebral or weird or supernatural or science fiction-y maybe going on, and we just don't know yet. But that makes me want to keep watching to be like, oh, am I right about the first layer of the mystery, and is there more? And
you haven't even seen the goats yet. That's all I'm going to say about that.
You can just say that?
I can just say that. I think the thing that was wild to me about watching this after the last group of shows that we watched pilots for is how this pilot tells you so much and so little at the same time. There isn't a lot of, I mean, there's some exposition dumps. Mostly, I think they're concerned you're not going to get the premise, and they kind of repeat what Severance is a bunch of times. But you get actually not a lot that happens. You get the introduction of Helly. You get this like outside, the contrast between outside Mark and inside Mark.
Adam Scott's so good in this.
I know. He gets better, too. And you get sort of his, the big reveal at the end of the pilot, which is that his neighbor is actually also his boss, played by the incomparable Patricia Arquette.
Right. And we don't know for sure whether or not she's also severed, but you can kind of guess by the way she's looking that she's not. Like,
the fact that she's one of the bosses, I kind of assumed she wasn't, especially when she just has the creepiest fucking vibe in the outside world.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a couple of related questions about this little like moment and reveal. And one is, they make such a big deal about the fact that they can't see each other outside. That's why their entrances are staggered and all.
Mm-hmm.
But they have company housing. So do they all live in the same neighborhood? They're going to see each other. And I would assume anybody in that neighborhood also works with me. My other question is...
I like this format. You could just ask me questions and tell me I can't answer them. Let's just do that
Great.
for the rest of the podcast.
Wouldn't you assume, or at least my assumption was, the reason you do... I mean, we know Mark has a different reason for why he does this. And I was watching with my housemate Kitsy, and I immediately said, like, oh, what tragic backstory is Mark running from that makes him want to do this? But not everybody has that. And so wouldn't you think the pay would be really good and that would be the benefit of this?
I think that should I answer?
I mean, again, if you have a show-based answer, no. But
the only thing that I'll say that isn't really a spoiler is that people have different reasons for doing it. Many of them, I think, like, we don't know most of the answers for that other than, like, maybe a couple of the people by the end of the season.
He should at least have a new really fancy car.
Sure.
Or something.
So if people who didn't watch the show, he lives in... Those apartments are in Nyack, New York, by the way. They're extremely expensive. But, I mean, I'm kind of assuming, and I don't...
Are they very expensive just because it's fucking Nyack?
It's got a view of the river.
Okay. I've seen a river.
I mean, it is to be expected that if your condo has a view of the Hudson River, that you're going to be paying through the nose for it.
Mm-hmm.
But all that to say, I assume that... Like, one thing you do discover is that this is clearly, like, a company town.
Right,
but it's not in
right.
the sense that, like, everyone doesn't work at Lumen, you know? And so it's not as clean as, like, everyone in that apartment complex definitely works there and, like, everything in the town is owned by Lumen. It's not that, black and white.
Right.
Also, I think as the series goes on, you kind of realize that, like, you don't really see anyone else in that complex except for him and his neighbor.
And he says, now I'm not sure if it's in which episode, but this is not a spoiler at all. He's talking to somebody about it, and he says, like, he moved in and it just never filled up, so it's pretty quiet.
Yeah, the apartment next to him is empty, all that stuff.
Also peculiar, but okay.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that sort of... that mystery / question in the series in and of itself, which is, like, when we get to the office, there are 4 of them in their department in this tiny little cluster of desks in the middle of a giant open but very low ceilinged room.
Quirky.
Like, if there are other people that work there,
well, they're waiting for the expansion.
They're very... Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, is, like, that's what they say. But is it like something else? Where are the people going? What's happening?
Should we go through the obvious theories that I don't think the show's actually doing, but that could be?
Yeah, go for it.
For example, it's not purgatory, but you could see how it could be.
Oh, yeah, it's not that.
It's, is this actually some experiment and everything is happening inside of Mark's head?
So they actually did one thing to make sure you knew that wasn't the case, which is when he gets out of the elevator the first time we see him go to work, and he starts walking down the hallway and he pulls a tissue out of his pocket. It's like that tissue is from when he was in the outside world, when he was crying in the car, and it still exists on the inside world. So theoretically, that is the, like, this is all real.
Oh, I mean, all of it, like, are both sides happening in his head is like, I don't think this is happening, but I'm saying, like, because the parallel of him living in a house in a mostly empty neighborhood run by his company and working in a cubicle in a mostly empty building run by his company. And
I mean, the eeriness generally of it
and just the way
it has like a dream feel.
It really does, inside and outside.
Yeah.
These are theories I don't think are happening, but I just mean, like, there are shows that have done similar things in a way that you could see people,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing feels very dreamlike. Like, we almost never see I'm thinking ahead now, so I can't really say if this is true in the pilot, but a lot of the time when we see Mark at home, it's nighttime. Or it's like all of the exterior shots ended up being filmed in winter, which is what Ben Stiller originally wanted to do. And then they had a bunch of COVID delays, and then they were going to start filming and it wasn't winter anymore. And he was like, I don't know. And then the writer's strike happened and the actor's strike happened. And then, so they pushed it back again. And then by the time they got to start filming, it was winter again. And he wanted it to be winter because he wanted there to be some sort of continuity between the vibe on the inside and the vibe on the outside. He didn't want them to be so drastically different, because the whole point is that Mark's life is bad in both places. And so there's a starkness and a cheeriness, or like weird, like queer in the traditional sense of the word, cheeriness,
right,
in the office that doesn't exist in the outside world. But they're both very cold places. And they're both very kind of empty places. The only place we see any real warmth, and it is very odd warmth, is at his sister's house.
Everything is odd everywhere. Like,
well, can I tell you one of my favorite theories about that? Because this is just a theory. It's not been proven either way, so it's not a spoiler. But those strange people at his sister and brother-in-law's house who were like asking the question about World War I, you know, they come across at her brother-in-law and their friends come across as idiots, but very like high on themselves,
like alien idiots.
Exactly. And so one of the sort of theories that's come out of this first season is that some of them are former severed people or severed people, like, because you would have the intelligence of a child if you were a person who was working as a severed person, and then
hold on, wait, okay, because
Andrea's very excited, in case you couldn't tell.
12 different things happening right now. So I need to table a couple. We've got to
we need an ADHD song, like a when it hits I can push a button, not a soundboard. No, not a okay. Yep.
But you're wondering how we
got here. ADHD is how we got here.
Okay. First thing, all I want to do is talk about these people. I've decided they're the key to everything. Just a couple of things. First one, his sister is normal and cool, and they have a lovely, like, very sibling-like relationship. Yes. They feel so real. She's normal.
Yeah.
Her husband is a buffoon.
I know.
He's a sweet buffoon. She's dating the...
He's so
dumb as a
great,
brick.
though. Like,
he's lovely. So stupid.
I know, but it gets so... His character is so, like, delightful in future episodes as well. Like, he is a character that just keeps paying off this premise. It's great.
But the only normal people I have met are Mark and his sister.
Yeah.
And these people are so weird, and they're the only other people in the pilot we see other than the other people who work for Lumen. And so when I was watching this, and I think they're intentional about not telling us exactly when or where this takes place, but I'm like, are we deep in the future where we're far enough away?
No, they do tell us. I don't know if it's in this episode, but there's a shot. Actually, it is. When Mark goes to the lockers before he goes into his job, he puts down like his wallet and his phone and everything, and you can see a quick shot of his license, which was issued in like 2020. So,
okay, so it is present
day. Yeah.
So they're just regular morons. Yeah. We don't even have history to blame for that.
Yeah.
So when you say formerly severed, whatever, not that they've been reintegrated, but that they've been maybe flipped, that the innies are now outies. It wouldn't make sense for them to be quite this stupid if they had just been reintegrated somehow and they were back to having their whole mind.
Right.
But it would make sense if they somehow escaped.
Right.
Like if they left the building
with just their innie personality.
Fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another question about like death and personhood and all of that too, because it's like, if the innie is existing on the outside, where is the outie's gone then? Yeah,
there's a lot of questions similar to this that come up in the later episodes. So I'm trying to be very careful about what I say.
Even their house looks different from everything else. It's the only place that isn't totally symmetrical. Even like the three beds.
Their house is it's not exactly a Frank Lloyd Wright house, but it is in a Frank Lloyd Wright complex that was like created by one of his proteges. That house,
you could totally feel that.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. They let's see, it's in Pleasantville, New York. He designed.
Oh, I like Pleasantville.
Yeah, not Nyack, though. So this is from an article in Thrillist. It says, so Jeremy Hindle is the production designer who we will talk about quite a bit, I think. But he designed 47 homes in Pleasantville, New York that featured his trademark angular forms and striking glass windows. Hindle said his team scouted most of them. The one I really loved was owned by a 96-year-old man who had it commissioned when he was 26. And he worked at Bell Labs, which is even weirder. Everything seems to be connected.
Oh, that is really weird when it's because it wasn't in Homedale.
No.
It was in fucking
Pleasantville, New York. Yeah. Yeah.
They're not close.
No. I mean, like... So anyway, I interrupted you because I got excited about the architecture thing. But
I interrupted you because I got excited about the idiots that he has dinner with. So
yeah,
I think it's fine.
That dinner
interruptions
scene
all the way down.
It's
so funny because that's what I'm like. One of them is like, it would have been a faux pas to call it World War, and that's. I mean, he corrects them, but it's so weirdly stupid because it's not even just right. It's not even just like, well, they'd never thought about the fact that of course they're not calling it World War I because nobody anticipated there being a World War II. That's one of those little. But it's the use of faux pas as like a
right.
It's just very strange.
No,
there's a lot of
weird.
Uncanny stuff going on.
Definitely.
But why, Jody?
I know, and I cannot tell you. Well, I don't know everything because they didn't answer everything at the end of the first season. They actually asked some more. They revealed some big things, but they definitely ended it on a cliffhanger.
Good. I love that.
Yeah, so thankfully it's coming back.
I think I'd be really good at the work they do.
Honestly, same.
Right?
There is a part of me that was like, give me a job in macro data refinement.
But it's got to be this kind. It's got to be vibes-based macro data refinement. But I think I'd be really good at that.
Yeah. For the people that didn't watch, they are seated at old school computer monitors with old school green.
There's no reason.
No. It's
unless. But as far as we know,
yeah, and there's like numbers floating on the screen that they have to identify the feeling that they inspire in them and put them in like buckets.
Have they made this a game?
No, but they should.
A playable game. They really should. That would be so funny.
Yeah.
I'd be so good at it. I can't explain why, but I just know that I would be so good at this job.
Yeah.
I'm like maybe the ideal Severance subject.
I mean, so the idea for macro data refinement came to Dan Erickson when he was working as a temp and doing like data entry.
I love data entry. I love it. And I think that I would be fine being like, Annie Andrea, I'm sure she's happy. She's doing what she loves. Like, I'll bet her coworkers are nice. And if they're not, she doesn't care. Like, I would trust that Annie Andrea would be fine.
But that's the problem.
But I think I'd be right.
Yeah, you think you'd be okay? Just waking up and going and like still being in the same office.
I think I would be Zach Cherry. I really hope there are episodes where we follow the other, don't tell me, where we follow the other innies on the outside. I want to meet Zach Cherry's outie.
My favorite thing is when you make statements or ask me questions and tell me not to answer you.
Because I know you want to.
I do. I know the answers. At least for season 1.
You know what? Pilot season after this week is all pilots neither of us have seen. For shows neither of us have seen.
That's not the case.
No, I'm declaring that a new rule.
You've decided. Yeah.
Yeah. It has been...
Oh, no. She's looking at the soundboard. There we go.
Decreed.
Okay.
Does that work?
No.
Oh, okay.
So, okay. The hook is pretty obvious, right? This crazy procedure, someone has gotten out, something has gone wrong, nobody knows what they're doing there. And one thing that we learn through his interactions with his sister and her sister's husband at the dinner party is that this is a controversial procedure in the outside world.
Yeah, people seem pretty up in arms about it. I don't know how I would feel. I know I just said I would happily jump in, but I'm trying to think seriously if I would just kind of be like, I don't know if that's what they want to do. Like,
right.
I think the bigger question for me would be what, as like a concerned citizen, is like, what is happening there that is so controversial or so sensitive that this procedure was even developed?
Right.
More so than should people have it done or not.
I just don't trust corporations. I just assume that they're doing something evil.
Yeah.
So, all right, I have some background stuff that I think will give some more, that will sort of flesh out the story of the show itself. And then maybe we should talk about the way that it looks, because set and setting is it is what kept me watching this show. I, unlike you, didn't watch the first episode and then go, oh my God, I have to see more. I was like, this is cool. Like, it's cool looking. It's interesting. I wasn't blown away. I think the fact that it sets up a lot of questions in the pilot with very minimal information. I kind of wanted to know more before continuing, but I kept going because of the look of it. I was like, this just is really interesting. I'm a visual person, and if you do something like super interesting visually, I'm going to check it out.
That part is not a surprise to me at all. I'm almost surprised that you even, like, I could see this being a show you would watch if it were in a different language without subtitles. Like, you know what I mean?
I'd still want to look at it. Yeah.
It's got such a look to it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that connects with, we'll talk about it when we get to the set and setting piece, but so the thing I thought was interesting behind the scenes of this is that this is Dan Ericsson's first show.
Wow.
He literally was working as a temp when he wrote this.
What a point of view. Jesus.
And it got to Ben Stiller through his production company. He'd been trying to get something made. It took 5 years for it to get from Ben Stiller's desk to HBO. But this is his first project.
Apple TV? Or was it HBO originally?
Sorry, excuse me. Apple TV. But yeah, it's his first project.
I'm so stressed out for him.
I know.
What do you mean?
I know. He went to Western Washington University, was writing short plays, and then went to NYU, got his master's in TV writing. So it's not like he's out of nowhere, but...
you know what's funny? This feels, in a way, like it could have... Like, you could see somebody putting up a version of this, a much shorter, smaller version of this as a play. It's got 2 sets that spin around. You know what I mean? They're like, they're the same on each side, and you've got 4 characters playing 8.
Yeah. So in 2016, his screenplay appeared on the Blood List, which I guess is like thriller/horror unproduced screenplays. Of the best unproduced genre screenplays. He'd been working in an office job. And he said that his job was so mind-numbing that he found himself wishing he could skip the 8 hours of the workday to dissociate and just get it over with. And then he was horrified by that thought. And realized that was a problem. But where is it? Yeah, so essentially he was shopping it around as a sample to try to get staffed in someone else's writer's room. Oh. And instead, Ben Stiller was like, his company, Red Hour Productions, was like, we should just make this.
That's really cool.
He was like, okay, I guess we'll make it. So, yeah.
And again, terrifying if I were him.
Absolutely.
Like, no, thank
you. Yeah, your very first, attempt at a story and a screenplay and a TV show is, being produced by Ben Stiller on Apple TV. With this huge really cool budget.
That they, just from the little bit I've seen so far, it's calling it I really like seeing it referred to as a thriller everywhere. It's cool that I don't know how to explain this exactly, but it's like, certainly I can see where it's going in some ways that makes sense. But it just doesn't feel or look or sound like what you expect from that genre. And I think that's very cool.
Yeah. It was really well received, which I think also is puts the pressure on season 2 for a new writer. But it got 14 nominations at the Emmys.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
Including Outstanding Drama Series, acting nominations. It won just for main title, design, and musical score, but Dan Erickson got nominated for his writing. Like, so for your first thing,
Yeah,
Jesus.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned the main title design. This is another show where the pilot you don't get.
Right.
Not
until episode 2.
Which is, I wonder what the practical reason is for that. Because you can add that in after. It's not like, well, we weren't sure if it was going to get picked up, and then once it was, we didn't shoot.
Yeah. I have to say, I find a long title sequence kind of annoying after a while, unless it changes. Unless it's something that will be updated, like with, Yellow Jackets sometimes would change it up, and you'd be looking for clues. I watched the title sequence of this one time and was like, okay, I'm good. Like, I think for me,
I think it's so cool.
It is cool, but I'm just whatever. Like, I'm not interested in seeing it more than once. But I think it's good that they did it for the pilot, though, or that they didn't include it for the pilot, because there's something so sort of visceral about throwing you into the show with that first scene of Helly on the table, that with and I think it would interrupt the flow if you kind of did a few scenes, then broke for the title sequence. I think for the pilot, it's so much about you being thrown into the world the same way Helly is that there's no room for it. Like, it would ruin the feeling of confusion and newness of all of it.
It is. That opening scene is really fun.
Yeah.
And you find out why, right, in the pilot, but the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, why are they being so vague? Just tell her, what's going on so she can calm down, because she's clearly got some weird form of amnesia and doesn't know who she is. So just tell her that, she's here on purpose and she wanted to be here. Do that first.
Yeah. No, you got to stick to the script.
Yep.
And Mark didn't. Mark missed the preamble. So.
And got thrown into it. It's fun to, that's one of the fun things about the show is how workplacey it is in those ways, where it's just like, well, I guess Mark's the boss today. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Better hope he's prepared.
Yeah. Then he wasn't. So should we talk a little bit about, even though we have been all along, the setting? Because I think that's what kept me coming back. And when I first watched this show, I didn't know that it was filmed, or that the offices were Bell Labs in Jersey. I just liked the way that it looked. The way everything is framed really photographically, which makes sense when you hear that Dan Erickson wasn't just referencing other films. He was actually looking at the work of certain photographers, which, of course, I love. Lars Turnbjork, I don't know how to pronounce that, has a series called Alien at the Office, which is incredible.
Perfect.
Lynn Cohen has a book called Occupied Territory that's also about spaces without people in them, or sort of uncanny spaces. And I think that's why, like you said, even if this was a foreign show without subtitles, I probably still would have watched it just for the look of it.
It's so intentional. And again, I love it, and it feels really good to look at. It's so beating you over the head with it, though. It's not, though. I loved it so much, but I'm not an artist, and I was like, I wonder if people hate how intentionally symmetrical and how intentionally mid-century modern so much of it is, and how stylized. Do some people think it's cheesy? And I didn't see that.
I don't think so. Yeah.
But I wouldn't hold it against somebody for watching this and being like, I don't know, I was kind of tired by the end of it of how, because it is and now knowing that Bell Labs really genuinely looks like that, especially from the outside, that parking lot looks like a brain splayed open. It looks like and everything is so symmetrical.
Yep.
It's so on the nose.
Yeah.
But I loved that. But again, I could see somebody being like, well, we fucking get it.
Right. I don't think so. As the series goes on, as the first season continues, you see more. It's funny because you've got this sort of bland white space. Anything that's different really pops out. Anytime you have a change of location, it's oh my God. And there are some changes of location within the offices that that are really rewarding because of that. You know, they have these endless white hallways, but there are other offices scattered around that we get to visit.
It's very
Apparently
cool.
they tried like 12 shades of white to get that right, and green for the floor in the offices. The whole color scheme of this, I don't want to belabor it too much because it's pretty obvious, but like everything is navy and red and green and white. Mm-hmm. And part of that, I think, is because the original implant was like navy and red. And then the green, it's like green and blue are supposed to be calming, but the tones that they use of green and blue, especially the green of that carpet, is anything but.
Mm-hmm. This is why I'd be good at the numbers thing, because I'm like, I can't explain why, but there's something that is both really pleasing and also off-putting and eerie to look at with a lot of this. Like that overhead shot of her splayed out on the table, the way all of the colors and even just the shape of the chairs kind of coming out like weird little... Like, I almost feel like if you found... I just interrupted myself because I was going to say the chairs are sticking out from the table in a way that makes it look reptilian. Like, it looks like she's laying on the back of like a weird lizard or dragon or something. Mm-hmm. And I almost feel like if you found out that what was happening in this building is if you went down far enough that it was like literal hell and there was like a literal dragon who's like feasting or something, like I wouldn't be totally shocked, right? You know? Like, there's just something about the way the show looks that opens up for, I am willing to entertain literally any possibility.
Oh, and you asked me if there was a video game of the refining numbers. I will say they're not in the world that we live in, but they actually, at each workstation, could refine numbers. Like, they had it set up so that was a working thing.
They actually work.
And
That's
so they
really
would sit
fun.
there and do it while the other people were doing scenes.
They released that for us. That's such a fun time.
Because they don't think anyone wants to do that.
Me.
I know.
Badly, in fact.
I know.
This is like something in a Myst game.
Yeah. There's a couple of things about that office setup. So there's the green carpet. There's a very low ceiling. There's the cluster of just 4 small desks in that huge open space. Mm-hmm. There's the old school looking computers. The fact that their cubicles only have... they have nothing from the outside world in them, right? They're not allowed any of those things. Everything on their desks is very specific, including the incentives that they get into later on. But one of my favorites that was like so subtle I didn't even really think about it when I first watched the show until somebody mentioned it in one of the articles that I read, and then I couldn't stop seeing it, was the cubicle walls. They raise and lower.
Yeah.
And that's not a thing that cubicle walls normally do. So, like, Irv can, like, lower the wall to talk and then raise back up. It's such a silly thing, but it's so funny. That's what I was just going to
say. It's so silly and it's so funny and it makes me laugh every time. And I did notice it. It's not like but it hadn't occurred to me that was, like, a choice that... Yeah,
it's a choice they made. They actually had to make that work. That's not a thing cubicles do. They had to actually figure that out.
Do you think...
It was just for shooting. It was so that they could, like, figure out how to have people talk to each other.
That's what I was just going to say, because
angles.
Otherwise they're leaning...
Yeah.
They'd have to be leaning around the walls. And then, so they're like, what if we just make it so they raise and lower? And then you get the visual gag of that really works.
Yeah. Yeah. In talking about the that room... Jeremy Hindle said I was wrong. They tested about 30 whites for the camera test and about 6 screens for the carpet. And he describes it as the most obnoxious color you've ever seen. It's the one who wouldn't affect your eye. It's almost like a putting green, really horrific, but it worked with the grading. Mm-hmm. So apparently the room is huge. It's like 40 by 80 feet, but the ceilings being really low makes it feel very like claustrophobic. Mm-hmm. He says he envisioned it as like a playground of sorts where the newly severed employees were put and monitored after emerging from the quote unquote womb, the boardroom where they wake up. Which I think is funny because they are. I mean, they're basically like small children.
Yeah. Yeah. And just certain things they say that feel very just like kind of sweet and childlike. Mm-hmm. The way they play with space in this show is so cool. And it's another reason that it feels to me like there's something more going on, like, and having that low ceiling but that huge room, so it feels like, I don't, now thinking back, I'm like, do we ever see the edges of that? We must. Yeah, but it feels like it could go on forever.
Well, that's the white of it, right? Like the hallways are white, the walls are white, and so even when there's a door to somewhere else, your vision isn't stopped because there's not another color outside that door. You're just continuing into the whiteness.
That really long, it's not totally a one shot, because I think there's a cut when he finds the tissue in his pocket, but it's like a really long, almost entirely uncut scene of him walking from the elevator to so you have that really long, confusing isn't the right word, but you kind of following him through that is so disorienting for
they actually
you,
built a bunch of those hallways too. Like the stuff that wasn't filmed at Bell Labs was filmed on a soundstage, and they built like super long white hallways for all of those scenes for them to walk through.
That's very cool.
They used some camera tricks too, like when the severed employees are in the elevator and they go through that transition from like innie to outie or vice versa. There's like that camera trick of, I think it's called a zolly, where you like zoom in but then kind of pull the camera back at the same time, so everything kind of like you're changing the angle of view of the camera. And it kind of
I've never heard that referred to as a zolly, but that is one of those fun camera tricks. Whenever you see it, you're like, they did it.
I think Hitchcock actually pioneered it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
There's that really cool like tracking shot with Helly when she first wakes up too, where they're kind of spinning around in the room, and you're kind of spinning with her, and she's like trying to figure out how to get out. And
I think it's fun because Helly is supposed to be us, right? Like, she doesn't know what the fuck is going on, and neither do we. And her reaction is to throw an intercom or a speaker at Mark's head, which would be my reaction as well. I don't know that I would actually do it because I'm too afraid to do that, but I love that she does.
Like her. She's spunky.
Yeah. One thing that we can maybe talk a little bit about that isn't related to set and setting, but is more the like larger context of the show, being that it took place during the time when everybody had kind of moved to working from home during the pandemic. A lot of people have compared this to a like labor drama, like the idea of that this came out when like Amazon and Starbucks were unionizing. Like, not that that was intentional, but that like there is definitely a critique of labor and corporate governance in this. And I think that becomes clearer as the season continues, that is actually a big part of it, is like this idea of collective labor versus corporate overlords.
It's also the work from homeness that was not the norm when the show was picked up. You said 5 years it took?
Yeah, so he wrote the screenplay, I think, in 2016.
Because, like, what would Severance look like for me?
Yeah.
I couldn't be severed.
No, you can't. Everything's in the house. Yeah. It also, I watched a video about episodic versus semantic memory, and I don't know that I can even explain what the fuck that is about, but it is something, there's, in the bigger picture, it's also about, like, what makes us us. Like, the thing that I think you can even see in the pilot is that Helly and Mark and Irv and Dylan all have their own personalities at work. They're not automatons, right? Irv, you know, is like the dad who like comes in and is like, "What's for dinner, kids?" or whatever his line is. Like, Dylan is like this super gung-ho, wants to get all the incentives, wants to get everything done. Like, Mark is the reluctant leader. Helly is the rep. Like, they all have their own personalities, even though they have no episodic memory, right? They have no memories of their life outside, but they have something that's still the core of who they are. And that's an interesting concept.
Stuff that happens on the outside has to put like new wrinkles on your innie's brain, right? Like sleep. Yeah. Sleep's not memory, but that sleep that happens outside, because I think it's in the first episode when they're like, you know, she says like, "Oh, so I never sleep." And like, "Oh, I find it helpful to focus on the effects of that sleep."
Yeah.
And so if you can focus on the effects of sleep, you can probably focus on the effects of spending however long the scene is long of you weeping in your car 5 minutes before you go to work.
Yeah, the sadness continues. He just doesn't know why, you know? But I do think that that's sort of one of the larger philosophical questions that the show is asking. I mean, the very first sentence in the entire show is who are you?
Who are
right?
you?
Like it's a little hammer hitting nail. But
because the question, the normal way to ask that is like, please state your name. Like, what's your name? Not
who are you? Yeah.
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 So that's what I mean. I'm not bothered by any of what I'm about to say. I just think that it is a fair critique for somebody to think that this show is a little pseudo-intellectual or like a little pretentious, trying to do a little more than it's really.
Yeah.
But I almost think, like, you're right, it is. But I think / hope it knows that, and that's sort of part of it.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that they are all kind of like big toddlers waddling around, so why not let the people at the dinner party also be big? Like,
yeah. Well, when you watch interviews specifically with Ben Stiller, and Adam Scott has talked about this, when they were making this, I'm sure this is the case whenever you're making something that's completely new, but they were in such a bubble because of the pandemic also, that they were making this and they were kind of like, is anyone going to understand what we're doing when this is done? Like, it feels like Adam Scott and Ben Stiller in particular had a really hard time finding the right tone for a while and understanding what the outside world was even going to think. Like, it felt like it was its own thing, and they were figuring it out on the fly. Like, the words were there, the story was there, but that story could be told. I mean, imagine that being told with a completely different color palette, right? Where if we took say we took the Fallout color palette or the Last of Us color palette and put it on this, or the Blade Runner color, like any of those other color palettes would change how we view the show. And so there's this like sort of weird off-putting brightness.
Or even just like, I think if you switched out the consoles or whatever, the computers for current day computers, and had those screens looking like Excel spreadsheets or something, like,
the old school technology is definitely part of it.
It's so specific.
And even things like he's shooting with a film camera in there. He meaning Seth Milchick. He's shooting with a film camera. The video that Hallie records is on a mini disc.
It's like, isn't it kind of rolled in the way it would have been in like,
on a cart, like a TV on a cart. Yeah, all of those things. Like, the technology is so old fashioned, and
even the way they explain to Audi Mark what happened to Innie Mark, why he's got the on his head, is that he slipped carrying a film projector. Yeah,
and I think that I read something about maybe that possibly the reasoning for that in the show was that to keep them from communicating with the outside world, right? You can't have fancy like networked technology if you're trying to isolate these people. But also that there's something comforting about it, like that old technology, which I agree with. I do think it's funny that. So we get introduced to Mrs. Cobell, also known as Mrs. Selvig. Her aesthetic...
Such good names. Everybody's got a good name.
Her aesthetic at work versus her aesthetic as his neighbor is so funny. She's like wearing almost entirely like crocheted clothing when she's her neighbor self. So I'm almost afraid to ask what questions this brings up for you, because there's so many, and we've kind of talked about this, but
I was gonna say, I think I yelled all of them at you.
Yeah, but maybe just to like
run them down.
Yeah, do a little summary of the like questions that this pilot brings up, because I mean, I can put myself back in that headspace as well. But for you, what are the big ones?
Well, I mean, the obvious one, what are they actually doing at Lumen? How does what the Severance employees, how does what they're doing play into what they're doing at Lumen?
Yeah.
I want to know, is this just busy work? Is the thing that's going on with these employees actually something totally different?
Yeah.
You know, what happened to Mark's wife? Whether they tell us why or how she died, I don't know that I'll believe it until I see it, kind of thing. What's up with Mark's sister's husband and their buffoon friends? This is a question in terms of as a viewer, like, am I going to get to see the other innies on the outside?
Right.
What other kinds of employees does Severance have? Will we see other offices? Will we meet other people? Will we figure out what's I have a question about everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's a thriller. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
Like, they've done a really good job setting up a lot of stuff for me to think about. Why did Helly agree to do this? We get the impression that she is particularly resistant. And you have to assume everybody is when they wake up to a degree.
I mean, Mark does say that, like, he threatened to kill the voice on the other side when he woke up, and that ends up being Petey.
Mm-hmm. Is the line, I was your best friend, you were my very good friend? Is that in the pilot?
I can't remember. Oh, yes, we do. Petey shows up at the restaurant where Mark is eating. And
Pips. That's another weird thing.
Oh, by the way, Pips is the exterior is the Phoenicia Diner in Phoenicia, New York, which is a really good diner that has it's kind of a hipster spot, but it's got amazing food. I went there when I was in upstate last summer, and we'll probably go there again this summer.
Now you have to.
Yeah.
Pips has a VIP section. It's just
a booth.
I can't tell what the difference is.
His reward for Pips isn't even like money, it's just the VIP section. They're not even paying for his meal.
No, he just gets to sit. But I like that he does it.
It's like my partner of the quarter pin.
Exactly.
It's like a little enamel pin that I got to put on my apron.
But I like that he does it. He's like, yeah, why not? I'll go sit at Pips in the VIP section. What a sad little life.
Yeah. But that line is in this episode where Mark says, so we're friends. And Petey says, I'm your best friend. You're my very good friend.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Brutal. I like Petey.
Yeah. And he gives him the card, the happy birthday niece card with a long note in it.
He sees Petey kind of as almost like an apparition.
In the woods at first. Yeah. Yeah.
Where I'm like, is he hallucinating that man? But then that's what I kind of thought. I was surprised by how quickly we meet Petey.
Yeah.
I thought if we were going to meet Petey, that might be like a season 1 finale kind of thing where you finally meet the guy who's on the outside. But no, he's way more the like catalyst for this stuff.
Well, that's exactly it, I think. Like, he is the thing that pushes Mark. I think it's obvious from this end of this episode that he's going to be the thing that pushes Mark to start asking some questions about what's actually going on inside of Lumen.
I want to know what the fuck is going on with the break room.
Yeah.
Seems bad.
Yeah.
Feels bad.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but...
I also love the fact that speaking of pretentiousness, that the dinner party that they go to at his sister and brother-in-law's house is a dinner party without food.
That's another reason I thought we were in the future. I was like, oh, do we not need food anymore? Because one of them is like, my friend in... Oh, God, Lima, maybe? Hasn't had a food-based dinner event in 2 years or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just to hammer home the idea that fuel can also be the conversations you have with other people.
Absolute doofy.
Rickon is great, though. Like, he's so, so funny.
I really like Rickon. Also that his name is Rickon is good. Like,
he's so funny in this. There's so many good moments he has later on.
I love just a dopey man. Just a sweet, well-meaning dope.
Oh, he is so, so dopey.
How many episodes did this season get?
9, I believe.
Okay. I can get through 7 of those tonight. No, I can't. It's funny, I said at the top of this, it doesn't really feel like there's a huge point in doing a point-by-point recap, which is interesting for a thriller and a mystery where, like, everything kind of should matter. But they really do spend a lot of time in this pilot getting you acclimated. Like,
yeah,
sort of understanding what the boundaries of the lives of the innies are seems really important. We have that scene where she keeps bouncing through the exit door into the stairwell.
Yeah.
And it's like a little confusing for us until we figure out what's actually happening there.
Yeah.
And developing this sort of that uncanny, off-putting, everything seems fine on the surface, but not even really on the surface, like, tone that's happening. It's just a lot of like mood and scene setting in this first episode.
Even when there are other people around, it doesn't feel like they're almost like they're not real. Like when Mark first walks into the building and he has to get checked in at the desk, there's other people in the lobby that are walking around, but none of them interact with him. He doesn't interact with any of them. It's almost like he's not really there, or they're not really there.
I'm so annoying. I'm going to keep saying uncanny. You know, you said dreamlike. Everything feels every space feels like a liminal space, even though the only ones really are the stairwell and the elevator, but it all feels very like in between. It just feels like we're in one direction that I can't quite pinpoint, a layer at least removed from reality.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what that is exactly.
I think one of the other things that gets briefly introduced in this pilot that I didn't even really pick up on that much in the beginning, but is this whole Kier thing. The CEO, the original CEO, Kier, there's like literally a carved face in the giant wall in the lobby of the offices.
Looking like A.G. Bell.
That gets bigger as not the actual carving. The idea of Kier.
How funny.
Can you imagine?
Every episode is just a little bit bigger.
Yeah. But the role of the founders, or the founder, gets bigger. And there is something to that when you think about the way that many of these giant companies have lionized, like, the genius, quote unquote genius, of their founders.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. And like, if you found out, I don't know how this could happen, but if you found out that like Lumen doesn't actually have a founder, that it's just sort of always like, man, I'm realizing that I'm deciding in my head what I want this show to be. And I want there to be some deep ancient evil underneath it all. And like, if you look in the Bible, Lumen is the name of a demon.
Oh,
you know what I mean? That's what I want
you
this
want
to be.
this to be a Jersey Devil origin story. It's the Jersey Devil
Leeds,
that's in the basement.
Lumen. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, yeah, and that like there is no founder actually, because Kier is really, you know, if you unscramble Lumen Kier, I don't know.
You get
Lumen
Jersey
is
Devil.
Also, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Lumen Kier backwards is Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
How long do you think it took them to settle on the name Lumen? Because it's perfect.
It is perfect. So one thing I did want to just mention that is weirdly separate from our main conversation about the show, but I thought was really interesting compared to other shows we've talked about, is the sort of extra, like outside of the show, extra information that people could find. So when this show came out, before the pilot even aired, Apple had put out a free ebook called The Lexington Letter. And I do think that, so you could have read it before you watched the pilot. So technically it's not spoilers, but I do feel like if you are someone who wants to learn about things by watching the show first, I'm not going to give any of the real information in it. But it's two things. It is a letter from a severed employee to a reporter that talks about her experience at Lumen. That's all I'm going to say about that. You can read it if you want to. But even more delightfully, after that letter, it also includes the Macrodata Refiner's Orientation booklet. So we got some of this information in the pilot from just hearing people like Dylan talk about incentives and things like that. There's like a mascot that looks very much like Clippy named Sevy, because he's severed.
Severed.
It explains what severance is. It asks what it means to be a refiner, which it doesn't actually tell you. It just says a macrodata refiner sorts data sets from different categories into digital bins, a task which requires immense skill and focus. Take pride in knowing that you have been selected for your vast intellectual prowess. We know you may be curious about what the numbers mean. However, knowing the true meaning behind the numbers could inhibit your natural intuition. Over time, certain clusters of numbers will start to make you feel a certain way. There are 4 categories: WO, FC, DR, and MA.
We only know, do we know what they all are?
I don't know if we know them yet. But it's not really a spoiler to know this. It's just like background information. There are 4 different types of numbers. WO is just woe. So the numbers elicit melancholy or despair. FC, the numbers elicit joy, gaiety, or ecstasy. DR, the numbers elicit fear, anxiety, or apprehension. And MA, the numbers elicit rage or a desire to do harm.
Man, I just think I'd be so good at it.
And so it goes through all the different screens that you'll see when you log into your computer at Lumen. It shows you the little Rolodex. It shows you this screen with all the numbers on it. Talks about how to select the numbers and refine them. It also talks about the office dress code.
Oh.
All clothing is to be monochromatic and solid in color. Permitted colors are black, white, navy, gray, and pastels. All attire is to be free of labels, as labels will activate the detectors placed in entry and exit points of the severed floor.
Interesting. Helly is wearing blue and green. Well, it's not navy, but she's definitely wearing green.
It says right after that, don't worry about remembering the dress code when you leave the office. As you are dressed by your Audi, this information has also been given to them.
Helpful.
Something else that comes up a lot in this and is even mentioned in episode 1 is the idea of illness. Dylan asks Mark if he's sick because he comes in, I guess, looking a little haggard. There's a whole section on health and hygiene in the handbook. And it says that employees must wash their hands at least 10 times per day, which seems excessive. Using Lumen branded soap, of course.
It would be really hard to get sick in as an innie. The Audis, sure, but...
Right. Yeah, and when they talk about interdepartment fraternization, part of the logic behind not fraternizing with other departments is to minimize the spread of pathogens. It talks about the wellness center, incentives.
What's going on, Jody?
They mentioned the waffle party in episode 1 too, which is such a...
He's going to earn that waffle party. I have faith in him.
The incentives start with a pencil eraser, which they don't have pencils, so that's kind of fun. A finger trap, the music dance experience, a caricature portrait, and then if you are a refiner of the quarter, you get the waffle party. There's also an egg bar and a melon party. Lots of things you can earn just by being a good employee at Lumen. So I would ask if you're going to keep watching this, but I know the answer because you have, and you will probably get through a few more episodes today.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to keep watching. And we're renewed for season 2, but we don't know when it's coming back.
So they finished filming, actually.
Nice.
So they're saying either late 2024 or early 2025.
Andrew here, just popping in. Jody and I recorded this episode a couple of weeks ago, and today, the day before this episode comes out, we happen to get our first look at season 2. Still no air date for sure, but they are still talking about it as coming out later this year. We got a very short video and our first footage of season 2, so soon. Hopefully. I just wanted to pop in and just mention that we did get a very tiny update, but one that does imply that we should be getting this show within the next 6 months. I also want to apologize for not bringing up the back rooms, which is so in conversation with this show. And I just want to make sure that listeners who've been yelling about the back rooms since this episode started are aware that I know I fucked up. Okay, back to the episode.
They're adding a number of new cast members for season 2, which I'm excited about. 2 that stood out to me just from things I've watched in the past are Leah Shawkat and Merritt Weaver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that should be fun. They already have quite the cast, so.
Yeah, it's a really fun, quirky, interesting cast. I just like everybody so much so far. So you've only watched to episode 3. You haven't met Christopher Walken's character yet, have you? Yeah.
Or have you? Okay. Burt Goodman.
Burt Goodman is such a what's the kids in the trench coat in BoJack Horseman? What's their name? Vincent Adultman.
Yeah. I do think the names are quite interesting. Rickon Hale, Irving Bailiff, Burt Goodman, Harmony Cobell, Helly Riggs, and Dylan George is Zach Cherry's character.
Oh, that's our second Jersey reference. I think he was born in Trenton.
Yes.
Zach Cherry, Jersey boy. Love to see it. Oh, happy belated 40th anniversary to Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA.
Nice. Also, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. Also, the 40th anniversary of Bon Jovi's, self-titled thing.
Did they really come out, within days of each other?
I literally this morning was fed a Stephen Colbert interview with John Bon Jovi. It's the 40th anniversary of the band's debut self-titled album this year. They're putting out a new album with a similar cover.
But within
an
days
updated cover
of each other, Born in the USA and Bon Jovi's self-titled.
That's crazy.
So Jody, are we done with the apocalypse?
It doesn't seem like we're totally done with the apocalypse. We're still going to be apocalypse adjacent.
I like it here. I'm happy to hang out.
For one more week. Yeah.
Who knew?
I know. It's been quite a run that we didn't intend to do. But yeah, we've been hanging out in some weird, apocalyptic, supernatural, future dystopia, uncanny valley world for a bit. We've got one more week before, as we mentioned last week, we are going to do some recaps of The Bear leading into season 3. So
excited for season 3 of The Bear.
I know. I just watched a YouTube video this morning on why the pilot of The Bear is the perfect pilot. I don't know that I agree, but I certainly get agree with a lot of the points that were made. So it's a great pilot.
I'm excited.
It's a great show. But next week, before we do that, we are going to watch a show that has been suggested to me by the internet many, many, many times based on other things that I watch. But it's something that neither of us have seen.
Yeah.
So we are watching The Leftovers.
We are.
Just the pilot. We'll see how that goes, and if it makes either of us want to continue it.
I don't know very much about it.
Yeah, it's got 3 seasons. Damon Lindelof show. Your bud.
I like that.
Yes, of course you do. I know that was actually the only thing I needed to say to convince you.
It's also Tom Perrotta, right?
Yeah.
It's based on, and I really like everything of his that I've read. I've read a bunch of Perrotta stuff. Jersey guy.
Yeah, Election, Little Children, Leftovers. Oh, well, that's easy. We got our Jersey connection. You know he's from Summit?
I just said Jersey guy.
Oh, I didn't hear that part. I wasn't listening anymore.
Big time Jersey guy.
Yeah, although now he lives outside Boston, but we'll forgive him.
Fucking New Englanders.
Shut up. So, yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I think it'll be good.
I do too, and I think it'll be nice because the last couple of shows we've watched, I have seen and you haven't, and I think it's fun to kind of break up that dynamic because a lot of it for me has been having to hold back things I know. And that can be challenging when I want to be like, oh my God, wait till you see what happens in episode whatever.
Yeah, I think Fallout was the last one that...
Yeah, because we did Station 11, Last of Us, and...
This one.
Yeah.
Severance.
Severance, thank you.
Yeah, this has been a real Jody run.
It has been. It has been.
I guess we'll just do Battlestar Galactica next to make up for that. To kind of get my, hand on the ball this time.
Let's talk after the bear. We'll talk after the bear. But yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this is something that I keep almost watching. It keeps coming up for me it's on Max. It keeps coming up for me as a suggested thing. And I have a weird relationship with Justin Theroux. I think because, I mean, not literally.
You said that so seriously.
I know. If you had continued to watch 6 Feet Under, you would understand why. His character on 6 Feet Under is very odd. Yeah.
When was the last time we picked a show I wanted to watch? We're 100% watching Battlestar Galactica, soon. Trade in all my chips.
We watched lots of your shows.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. I really liked, I think, everything we've watched, right? I don't think there's anything I haven't liked.
Yeah. We started with Lost, which I had seen, but is definitely your show. Then we did 6 Feet Under and Sopranos, which was me and then kind of neither of us. And then Twin Peaks and X-Files in a row. Both you.
Was Twin Peaks a me pick?
Yeah. I think, well, that was mutual, but like I knew less about it, I think, than you did.
Okay.
Because I had watched it once, like 1,000 years ago when it came out. And then we did Fallout, which neither of us had seen.
So it's just this last little run here.
It's last 3, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll just trade it in for one BSG. And
Sure.
it's so funny because when I got asked to do the Battlestar podcast, I was like, it's fucking fine, I guess. I'm going to make fun of you guys the whole time. I don't care about the show, and now I'm obsessed. Okay, leftovers.
Leftovers next week. You can email us at watcherspodnj@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at watcherspodnj. You can find me on Instagram at Jody_Mim. And you can find Andrea at
AQ Andrea Q.
I don't know where we're going to see you next week. We're going to see you. Yeah. I don't know. We're going to be hanging out with Justin Theroux. That's all I know.
Complicated. Jody's got a complicated relationship with that guy. So
I do. I have a complicated relationship with him. So
buckle up, everybody.
We'll see. Maybe he can override my memories of him as Brenda's boyfriend after Nate in 6 Feet Under.
Brenda.
I know you're not a fan.
I have a complicated relationship with Brenda.
And you only watched like the pilot.
All right.
He dated Jennifer Aniston. Oh, that's right. They married each other. And then they got separated. I'm on Wikipedia. This has to stop. Goodbye, everyone.